Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. So what is actually going on with Cedric Tillman? Because at this point, I'm starting to be slightly concerned about him, because being out for 5 weeks with a concussion, that's not a nothing deal, right? Like that, there's something there, or at least you would have to imagine that there's something there. I know some people's first instinct is to think that, okay, well, the Browns, they're not really in a position where they're rushing anybody back to play because they're not in playoff contention. And maybe this is just them letting Cedric Tillman take his time back, because he has practice limited since this concussion. But I don't think that's the case, because Cedric Tillman isn't one of these like vets that you would rest if there was any question, right? Like JOK, I think, is more close to that conversation than like a Cedric Tillman is, who definitely needs to play. He's super inexperienced, especially with the role that you're going to give him next year. So I think that there's actually just something up. Like the concussion is taking him out for 5 weeks. I tend to not be one of the first people to overreact about the concussions, right? Because like when people do this about Denzel Ward, I think it gets over the top. But Denzel Ward doesn't miss 5 weeks for concussion. Like, for example, the only 2 people off the top of my mind I can think of that's missed 5 or more weeks because of a concussion: Tua Tagovailoa, who missed 5 weeks this year, 4 games, 5 weeks for him. And then Cameron Jordan, remember him, the tight end for the Browns who retired because of concussions? He missed, I think, 5 weeks at some point in his career with the Cleveland Browns because of a concussion. It was really like the beginning of the end for him, because once he had that next concussion, he chose to retire. So like, one, how serious is this concussion? I know it's with concussions, with neck injuries, I know people are frustrated about JOK, the not knowing what's going on with JOK and Cedric Tillman. With all of that, those are the type of injuries that you can't just rule somebody out for a definite amount of time. It's not like if I break my bone or if I tear my ACL, there's a set amount of time that we know from history that it takes to recover. Like, we've seen guys come back from concussions within a week. We're watching Cedric Tillman right now come back from a concussion, and it might be 5 weeks, right? And like, I don't remember the hit that took Cedric Tillman out. But it felt like it was a lot more significant than like some of the hits we've seen take Denzel Ward out, right? But Denzel Ward came back faster. So you can't just throw a timeline on a neck injury or a head injury. So it's not like they can just come out here and say it's a 3 to 4 week injury or his season's up. It's very well that like Cedric Tillman might feel better tomorrow and play in the finale. But something like, I'm not saying panics, act like Cedric Tillman's career's over or anything like that. That would be absolutely doing too much for somebody who, this is, I believe, his first major concussion in the NFL. But that's not nothing, right? So it's something to keep your eye on with Cedric Tillman as his career progresses, is like, hey, he had a major concussion his second year in the NFL. Because how else can I categorize a concussion that keeps you out for over a month? Like, it's got to be a major concussion. It's not the normal timeline that we see with concussions. Maybe he's just playing it safe because he knows what the time of the season is. Again, I just find it hard to believe that Cedric Tillman would just leave his best friend out there on an island in DTR, like his homeboy is finally playing quarterback. I would think he would want to be out there if he could be out there. So I think that, like, he's just not passing the test. He's just not clearing concussion protocol, right? Like, we just haven't heard that he's cleared the protocol. And there's tests that you have to do, like a score you have to get on the concussion protocol test that includes like moving around and taking like answering questions and all this. Like, there's physical parts of the test, cognitive parts of the test, and then like memory parts of the test. And he just can't pass it, which indicates that he does have like a more serious concussion, versus like when Denzel Ward gets these, he clears protocol like that. Like, he just gets in and out of it so fast. Time will tell on that one, but like with Cedric Tillman, I would start asking questions. Like I would start being concerned about that one. We did get an update about JOK from the linebacker coach Jason Tarver. This is from the OBR. Shout out to Fred Greetham. He says we text all the time and talk as much as we can. He and the linebackers have their little text going. He's so involved. JOK was placed on injured reserve, so he has not provided any updates on his situation other than he would not play in the next game when asked. We're all just rooting for him to be able to figure out everything he needs to figure out with, like you said, with his travel schedule, to see different doctors and things, just making sure he's good, but in good spirits, not hurting, all good. This really sounds like to me, and this is just my guess, this is my speculation based on what we all know. So if you have a different out take with this or something like that, like that's fine. But my guess, given what we know, is that they're just not going to risk it with JOK. Maybe if this were a more pressing situation, like the Browns were in the middle of a Super Bowl run, they might consider letting him play at the end of the season. But this to me feels like they're gonna wait, right? Because Tarver said at the end of this interview, but JOK, he is in good spirits, not hurting, all that's good. Like he says that. So to me, I'm like, okay, they know it's a neck injury. It looked pretty bad when he got it. And it was pretty concerning how like he had to get carted out and everything like that. And maybe that's just them saying, hey, we're a 3-win team in December. JOK does not need to be out there. We don't need to rush him out there. He can just, until we are 1,000% sure, he will just wait till next year, right? And I think that's just what we're seeing with him. Now, why they just didn't put him on the injured reserve list for the rest of the year, I don't know. Maybe it's something else. Maybe the nature of the injury is similar to what kept, what was his name, Greedy Williams out, right? Where it's kind of a nerve thing where it could feel better at any moment, but it's not really a particular timeline injury. We'll see with that, but I don't think, I know people are worried that like his career might be over, but I don't think that's the case. And until I hear something that's a little bit more concrete about that being the case, or he announces that his career could be over or talks about it, then like I'll go there, but I don't want to speculate on a man's career being over when there's really no good reason to do it as of now. Now, if something pops up, obviously. Another injury update. We talked about Watson's restructure. Part of the reason we got the restructure because Watson, I believe, was in Berea this week because he signed that contract restructure that added, I think, a dummy year to his contract. But also he took a picture of himself standing up. So seems like his recovery is going well. I would like to remind people, though, we tend to underestimate how early you can walk after an injury like that. Remember, we were losing our mind with Aaron Rodgers because he was walking and throwing a football like 4 weeks or 8 weeks after he got the Achilles tear, and people swore that he was going to be back super early from that thing, and then he ended up not being back to practice until like the week before the season started. Yeah, so he's walking, but like that's a long ways to go before he can actively play football. My big question for Watson and the Cleveland Browns is, the word is he's going to compete for a quarterback job. Now, this could go one or two ways, right? Either the competition is real and he's not guaranteed the starting job, or they're just placating the fans by acting like he's going to compete. But the reason I call BS on the idea that he's going to compete for a quarterback job, not knowing whether they mean it as in they're just going to announce him the starter or put somebody else in there, is because how is Deshaun Watson going to compete when he can only be limited during camp? Like the best, most aggressive report is he will be cleared for practice, but not full contact by the start of camp. And maybe by the start of the season, he could play. We're talking about a dude who has not played enough football, right? Like that's been the big thing on him. He hasn't played a lot of football. So he's already not going to take a ton of practice drills. He's not going to do a lot of team drills. He's not going to play in the preseason. Like the one guy in the league who needs to play preseason games, who needs to practice a ton, is not going to be eligible to do that. how are you going to compete in the quarterback competition when you can't play in preseason games, when you can't full practice during camp? So like either he's not going to be able to compete and whoever you bring in is just going to start, or he's not going to be able to compete and you just name him a starter anyways. Like, be interested to see how that shakes out, right? But I think because it would make sense, because Watson was so bad last year and he's coming off an Achilles injury and he's going to be able to play even less football to prepare himself this offseason than he did last offseason. Like, think about that. Like, the whole benefit of playing Watson again, or even like not even playing Watson again, the whole benefit of like Watson getting the second offseason, like, okay, he gets the second offseason with the new offense. But he doesn't. He's not going to be active. He's not going to be in the spring. He's going to get less prep than he had this year, and he had all the prep last year, and he looked like this. The odds aren't stacked up for him to look good next year if he tries to play. I doubt he'll be the starter next year to start the season. So, like, who are they placating by saying he's going to compete for the start job? Well, either he's the starter or he's not. But there's no competing for Deshaun Watson, right? Like, maybe I'll be proven wrong by that by the time we get to not September, but July. But like, I feel like come July, we're gonna see that ruse for what it is. Like, he's not. There's no competing. Either he's gonna be the starter or he's not. That's just something I thought about, right? Just looking at the timeline for an Achilles injury, and even like if you look at it for the most aggressive way he could come back, like I don't think Kirk Cousins was practicing in camp for the Falcons until maybe the last week of their camp. I wonder about that. All right, last thing I want to talk about, I want to get into a couple of things I would like to see from DTR in this game before he plays it. One, just be a more aggressive passer, right? There were a lot of pump faking, a lot of like times where he had an opportunity to throw a ball that was open, but he chose not to. Want to see him be more aggressive there. And I want to see what this Browns offense looks like when they just lean into the quarterback run like they did at parts of last week's game, because I think there's something interesting there. So those are kind of my updates, the little bits of news that we got. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.